And thank you very much for joining us here on PM Express. I'm pretty sure you followed the conversation that the statistics put out by the Statistical Service has revealed when it comes to disparity in the salary of the public sector. That conversation has been happening for the last, 3 days or so. Tonight, we're going to look at the big picture because one of the key things that we haven't explored enough is the challenge with the single spine salary structure, which appears to be the reason why that disparity exists. And so tonight we're going to asking that very fundamental question. Is it time to scrap the single spine? As I go through my presentation, you will notice that we have over the years attempted through many means to try and fix this disparity. But it appears that whatever we throw at it, the disparity appears to exist, and as economic conditions worsen, the gap expands even further. So let's go to the basic statistics as provided by the Ghana Statistical Service, and then we'll get into some of our own analysis that we did. And you probably would have followed us on PMS. We've done many labor conversations, and each time we've done it, either the TUC, either NAGRAT or NAT, they always warn us that we are not being paid at all. And I will challenge them and say, but show me the evidence. And then they'll mention, a bit of the anecdotal evidence. Now, there's incontrovertible evidence from the Ghana Statistical Service. And the chart you see in front of you right now is one that just depicts a problem. So what you see here, that big part of this pie, right, is 80.93%. That number of people in the public sector, they earn just less than 3,000 cedis. And we are talking about a total number of 688,000 employees. A overwhelming majority of them, 80% of them, take home less than 3,000 cedis. In an economy with inflation above 50%, if you take home 3,000 cedis, that is quite astonishing in terms of how meager that is. Fuel alone probably wiped this out. You haven't paid electricity if you're renting. You haven't paid electricity, you haven't paid your rent, you have to eat, you have to... Amazing how they survive. And this is overwhelming majority of those 688,000 of them. But if you break it down further, right? Those who may claim to be earning even something, a bit more reasonable and decent, just the 15.16% of them, they earn only between 3,000 and 5,000. Let's call it 5,000. Let's round up 5,000 cedis. Even that, in the current economic circumstance, is pretty meager. So even for those who earn a lot, in the public sector terms, and if you see the statistics here, and that's the 2.99%, they earn between 5,000 and 10,000 cedis. So again, if you look at the problem, it's a pretty stark reality for those who work in this particular sector. I mean, they have the 0.9% who earn between 5,000 and above, and you see that there's the outlier, a very, very tiny minority of them who earned it. But the focus has been on this 80.9. Who are they? Who are they? Let's put some name. Which sector would you find most of these people? Are they the teachers? Who are they exactly? I'm curious. When you begin to appreciate who they are, next time when you meet them and they show you attitude, you possibly will understand why that is. Because if you're paying the guy less than 3,000 cedis, what do you expect from him in this economy, right? There was a president who once said that in Ghana we pretend to pay and our public sector workers pretend to work. I guess this tells the story. Let's get to the other data that surprises me. So you can find that there are people in the public sector who earn 33,855 cedis, right? That is the disparity. Those people in that bracket, the highest paid workers, they earn 81 times more than the lowest guy. The lowest guy earns 418. I bet if you do the calculation, this guy who earns, there's somebody in the public sector taking home 418 cedis a month. I bet, isn't that below the minimum wage? I'll ask my guests who are joining me. I'm just curious. I mean, the minimum wage for last year, if you calculate it, isn't this below the minimum? I'll ask that question when my guests join me. But 418 cedis, a salary, 1 month salary, amazing compared to the guy who is earning. So this tiny minority, this guy, somebody is taking 33,855 cedis. Compare him to this guy who's taking 418 cedis. What can you do with 480 cedis? If you eat kenke alone for 1 week, this will go. Kenke and fish, trust me. We did PM Express on the market the last time. It will just knock this off. I like gobe. I mean, I wonder how much, if I do gobe 10 cedi a day, 10 cedi a day, 7 days, that's 70 cedis. I mean, you haven't paid electricity, this is impossible. We will come to the details, but that tells you a story. And then you also look at the averages, same, right? Same story, you begin to see. And then the subject of the allowance must be factored into the equation according to Ghana Statistical Service. Because if you look at the 10,000 cedi guy, he's taking a fair bit of allowance as well. The lower you earn, the lower your allowance. So the allowances also come into play if you move away from the basic salary equation, the salary of the deductions. And I find it's also interesting because the guy who is earning a lot, over 10,000 cedis, is paying a share of taxes, if you compare, of 25%. This is progressive. However, that guy who is below 1,000 cedi, his 14% will hit him pretty hard, will hit him extremely hard compared to the guy who is earning over 10,000 who is paying a tax of 25%. So that is the reality of this as well. So no matter how you look at it, the disparity in the guys down there who are earning the 80% plus who are earning that meager amount are being hit from multiple sides in terms of the ability to survive this harsh economic reality. So what has happened over the years to try and address this? In 1972, we had something they call the Prices and Income Board, right? And they tried to deal with this by they wanted to vet and approve incomes and prices. And then came the Ghana Universal Salary Structure in 1999. Remember this, it was very controversial. And it was to provide a universal structure for public service salaries. We were on this for a while, and then, we thought that was not dealing with the problem. And so they brought in the single spine pay structure in 2010. And this was to ensure equity, fairness, transparency in public, service salaries. And that's where the question is tonight. On the back of these revelations, has the single spine pay policy, the structure, has it outlived its usefulness? Is it time to scrap it and think about something else? And if we're going to replace it or amend it or review it, what do you replace it with? How do you even restructure it? I'll get some thoughts from my guests who will join me tonight. Now, in 2022, we're looking at a compensation of employees, and we looked into the Ghana Statistical Service document, and they gave us a hint. One of the key things my guests, anytime they join me on PM Express, when we're talking about labor issues, they tell me, look, when they say that the public sector compensation is taking all our revenue, it's even really not true. You have to disaggregate the debate and tell us, the political class, the Article 71 office holders, how much of that bulk are they taking away? So we got a clue from the Statistical Service document, and we decided to do our own calculation. It may not be exact, but it gives you an idea of the disparity between the 688,000 public sector workers and the Article 71 office holders. It gives you a fair idea. Okay, so in 2022, according to the budget, compensation, right, amounted to 38.5 billion cedis. That's how much we budgeted. Now, if you used the numbers that we got, the December pay that the Statistical Service computed to calculate, the amount paid to all public sector workers came down to 27.6 billion. That is the 688,000 workers. They took home, all of them together, took home 27.6 billion. The difference you'll be left with is 10.9 billion. And we assume that 10.9 billion would go to the Article 71 office holders because they were largely not part of the work that the Statistical Service did, although there were elements of it, but largely they were not part of it. So that tiny minority of workers call Article 71 office holders, including the president, the members of parliament. They're small. I mean, we don't know their exact numbers yet, but they may just be in the thousands. I mean, I doubt if they're even close to 2,000. And I'm being very conservative here in terms of my analysis and assumptions. They take home 10.9 billion compared to 688,000 workers who are going home with 27,000. That tells you that there's something really unusual in terms of the quantum, the size, the very sheer size of the salary when it comes to Article 71 office holders. That small, tiny minority of them, just around 1,000, we believe, just taking home 10 billion, and a whole, close to 7,000 people going home with 27 billion. So that should begin to give us a sense of when the labor unions say we have a problem, that we need to restructure it. And that is why you have the government's decision making the point that a single spine salary structure needs restructuring. But how do you restructure it and what do you replace it with? And I find this data set also interesting, that if you look at the map of Ghana, you look at the earnings, if you are in Greater Accra, that's where you earn an average of 3,142 cedis, right? So Greater Accra is if you're the highest earner, if you work here, for obvious reasons. Cost of living in Accra is far higher than if you say you are in the Upper East region. And if you look at the Ashanti region, 2,531 cedis is what you probably earn on the average. I find that interesting because if you compare Ashanti region, which is an urbanized area, for example, if you see the Ashanti region that maybe includes Kumasi as well, and you compare to Upper East region, which is, the disparity, the comparison, it's pretty close. And one argument a colleague of mine raised is that maybe because the people who want to go to the Upper East to go and work are incentivized. And that is why maybe their salary is so close to if you are in a Ashanti region. Maybe that's a reason. I'll get my guests to join me and tell me what they think about this. But this is a conversation that we need to have about what do you do with a single spine, because it's just not fair. It's just not fair that there are people earning 418 cedis in today's Ghana and people earning less than 3,000 cedis. 80% of public sector workers. At the time when, as we now beginning to understand, a tiny minority of people whose class has been defined in the Constitution, they call them Article 71 officers. They are a very small group. They are taking home the pie. The pie was 38 billion. They alone, small group, take home 10.9 billion. When 6,888 people, that's a lot of people, take home 27.6 billion. So there are a lot of questions, and we'll try and disaggregate and understand a bit more, and then ask that bigger question that Prof. The Ghana statistician has been hinting. What do you do with a single spine pay policy? Stay with me after the break. And thanks for staying with us. Listen, I've just been having a bit of the conversation with my guests in the studio because I know you've heard it before, but as I began to drill it down, a lot of it is shocking. Joining me in the studio is Professor Samuel Kobena-Enin. He's a government statistician. Angel Kabonu is the president, National Association of Graduate Teachers. We'll be joined by Joshua Ansah. He's the Deputy Secretary General of the Trades Union Congress via Zoom very shortly. Mr. Kabonu, let me start with you because I want to put a human face to the numbers. So these 80%, those earning below, who are they? Which sector would you find them?
Majority will be in the education sector.
Okay.
So we have our security men, our drivers, our cook in the various senior high schools, cleaners, and so on and so forth. Go and check that. And then when you even disaggregate this 80% thing, you realize that there is a chunk of people who are earning less than 800 Ghana cedis. Well, the various security men are earning less than 800 Ghana cedis. The cleaners are earning less than 800 Ghana cedis, and so on and so forth. Then you come to those who are having the diplomates within the Ghana education, whose take-home salary is around 1,800 currently. Then we come to the degree holders, because the GES workers constitute the largest group of workers in this country.
You're right.
Then you go to the health sector, the orderlies, the cleaners, and so when you take GES and health, I think they constitute about 60 to 70% of the public sector workers in terms of numbers. So you see majority of these people in that sector. You know, that's where they are. You go to the ministries and then you see the lower rank officers and so on and so forth. So that's where you see majority of these people.
I see. And so those below, I mean, so this is you've given me a sense of those really in the lower end of that 3,000 less. Yeah. But those close to the 3,000 marker who would...
Yeah, those close to the 3,000 marker will be medium and senior officers. So for example, in the Ghana Education Service, you look at people like deputy directors.
Deputy director?
Yeah, no, but let it not confuse you. It is the name of the rank. Don't get confused.
Because that's like a big post. That should come with a lot of money.
It sounds big, but it is not big. You know, so we have in Ghana Education, we have the principal superintendent. That is the entry point at level 16 of the single spine. Then you get to assistant director 2, assistant director 1, deputy directors. Then you go to director 2 before the director 1. So these things should not sound too much like we are directing anything huge and we are getting anything.
So the deputy director will be in the 3,000
will be
less, 3,000 less bracket.
Will be within the 3,000 bracket. That is, you would have stayed in the Ghana Education Service for about 12 or more years.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. 12 years, and you'll be earning 3,000.
3,000.
Then the entry guy will be earning what?
The entry guy should be around 2,001, 2,200.
Entry guy degree?
Degree, yes. Now you come in, you start from level 16 on the single spine pay policy.
Wow.
Yes.
Prof, you did the data. I mean, you put it together. But that's a problem sometimes with numbers. It doesn't put a human face. Now you're beginning to appreciate that the teachers who teach our children are those that you in essence, part of that 80%. And if you have a child in school, you're wondering, that teacher that came to your classroom is teaching your child is taking home 2,000, just above 2,000 CDs a month. In today's economy, you have told that we are above 50% in terms of inflation. So that salary actually is in the negative, in essence.
Yeah, absolutely.
True or false?
Yeah, absolutely.
That salary is in the negative. So how do you realistically, I mean, I know that's not a question for you. But you tell me, when you saw the numbers, I know you are a prof, so you're looking at the hard facts, but there must be a part of you that began to wonder, this must be a pretty dire situation.
Thank you, Evans. I mean, indeed, when I saw the numbers, it got me to think, and you are right. Once you see these numbers, you try to disaggregate it from the nominal wage point of view and the real wage point of view. So the real wage point of view is where you throw in the effect of inflation. So if inflation is around 53.6 and somebody is earning around 3,000, then you are concerned in terms of what the person can really do with it. But let me be quick in saying that we need to put this conversation in a context. So this data is not a usual survey data, it's not a usual census data. We are starting the journey of using administrative data to inform decision making. So this data is coming from the Controller and Accountant General's Department as at December 2022.
Because he does the payments.
Yes,
so he knows.
But it is not all public sector workers that get their salaries via the Controller and Accountant General Department. So there are institutions like Bank of Ghana, SNIT, GRA, and a number of institutions that do not get their salaries through the Controller and Accountant General Department. Once we are clear with that, we should be careful in trying to identify MDAs or groups of people who are on this, because the data that we got have it across different MDAs and again have it across people on different payrolls. We were circumspect in putting out institutions because, one, it is not the exhaustive list of public sector employees. So if today we sit here and say that institution A or payroll A is the one receiving the highest, and we get a full complement of the data and it turns out that one of the institutions that do not get their salaries through the Controller and Accountant General Department is indeed the highest, then we'll be given a different picture. So it's important we put it in its right context.
I mean, Mr. Kabono, again, so when you first saw the numbers, I guess it wasn't a surprise.
No, for me it was not a surprise at all, because This is what we've been bantering here.
Yes.
Whenever
anytime issues come up.
And then we've even made demand from government that whenever government makes a statement that, oh, public sector workers are taking this percentage of internally generated revenue, then we tell government, okay, let's sit down, let's disaggregate them into portions, and let's see who actually, in terms of numbers, takes the huge quantum of the amount of internally generated revenue, who actually takes what who, and who is actually taking the bigger chunk of the pie. Government will dilly-dally, and we will never sit down, labor versus government, to look at the issues as they are. Because from our point of view, sometimes we even tell government that when you talk about public sector workers, as far as labor is concerned, it is those who have been employed within the formal government sector. It does not include your political appointees.
Okay.
People that you have appointed
Special
as
assistants,
coordinators, some call themselves consultants, who come in and are taking chief director salaries with chief director specs and so on and so forth. For us, let us even see how much from the government kitty goes to these people. You understand? And compare it to the public servant or the civil servant who has been working for the past 20 to 30 years, and find out how much he or she also takes home. Then you begin to see the unfairness in how we dish out monies to people as compensation for work that they've done or work that they have not done. This argument is always raised whenever government seems to excite the sympathy of the public to indicate that, oh, they are taking this huge percentage of our internally generated revenue every year. Therefore, when they come to make demands, tell them that they are not entitled to what they make. Then whenever we...
And I've asked you a lot of those questions.
Yes.
Because I see the compensation at 38 billion, and I'm
It's
but
huge.
why are you complaining? I mean, you're taking everything we make. The rest goes to paying, servicing our debt. So you don't deserve more.
We even told government to tell us which sectors it is serious in collecting taxes and whether they are aggressive in collecting taxes, and if we had done a little bit more in the collection of taxes, whether we would not have brought that percentage down. You understand? These and many more. You will be shocked at sometimes where those who have been given tax exemptions, and you wonder whether those people deserve tax exemptions and so on and so on. At the end of the day, the statistics show that public sector workers are taking huge chunk of the revenue. The fact of the matter is that majority of public sector workers are impoverished in this country.
Which is the reality, as Prof has
Yes.
indicated. And there's something that, Prof, you can expand on this for us. The point that he makes is, and that always comes down to the question of disaggregating the numbers. When you say public sector workers take home, the compensation package on the budget was 38 billion last year. And wow, that's a lot of money, because then if you take that out and you take what we used to pay the debt, nothing is left. Then they will say, but they don't deserve more because, you know. But in your data, you gave us a hint. So in December 2022 alone, public sector workers, if you're using the gross number, they took home 2.3 billion cedis. Okay, so if you're holding that salary constant, you can calculate times 12 what it came down to, and as we did it, it came down to 27 billion cedis thereabout. Take that away from 38 billion, we are around 10 billion. So 10 billion go to everybody else who is not part of the 688,000 people that you were using. Who were those people? We're assuming that those people might be Article 71 office holders. Is that a safe assumption to make?
I would be very cautious in doing that. And let me say that, you see, we need to work towards making Ghana a truly statistical community. And what that means is that if we are using numbers, we need to use it extensively to get a better understanding of our circumstance. The data that we got from the Controller and Accountant General Department indeed has categories on Article 71. We need to engage them more to understand which categories of people are there for Article 71, whether it's exhaustive of all those who are there or otherwise. We have a category on the payroll called political appointees. Again, I'm not too sure whether it's exhaustive of all political appointees or, as I said earlier on, because the data is restricted to only those who get their salaries via the Controller and Accountant General Department, it might not be exhaustive of all the political appointees, and also it might not be exhaustive of all the Article 71 workers. The other caution that I'm throwing in is using the budget as a basis to say that 10 billion is going to somewhere that we don't understand. Let me use Ghana Statistical Service as an example. Any government MDA that at the beginning of the year, you think about expansion, you think about promotions, you factor into your budget these things that is going to occur during the year. And the last 4 years with Ghana Statistical Service, we're always doing about 60-70% of our compensation budget because we are going through an institutional restructuring, so we don't meet what we budget for.
So you don't spend everything you budgeted for?
Yes. Okay. So using the budget is a challenge. And I go back to my earlier point. It is not difficult to get the information on the actuals. So why wouldn't we use
They have been asking this for God knows how long. They haven't received it. That's why when we saw this, we thought, okay, let's use that as a basis to try to give us a sense of.
Yeah, so I'm bringing this up, Ivan, so that going forward, we can get the support to institutionalize this work that we've started. Our goal is to bring on board GRA, SNIT, and all the other institutions that would help us complement the data that we have from the Controller and Accountant General Department. Once we have that data, the two of us can do all the analysis that we want to do. But now we have to be careful in drawing some conclusions.
So I get your point saying that you actually, in the long run, because this just started, you actually want to get to a place where you can disaggregate the numbers. Absolutely. For all of us.
Absolutely.
You want to get there.
Yes.
What sort of cooperation are you getting in doing that? I'm asking that base because I know Angel Kabono and TUC have been asking this question. Each time they sit around the table to negotiate, it's always part of negotiating, and the government will not give the numbers to them. And so possibly you may come up against a challenge. I'm just curious.
I mean, it's possible we might have challenges, but from my point of view, that will not deter us. I mean, the last thing you do is to anticipate a challenge so that you, in that case, you don't proceed. We are happy Controller listened to us, and they've given us the data, and we've started this conversation. Now we have a National Statistics Advisory Committee that brings on board 25 government MDAs, and the institutions that I've talked about, they are all part of this. One of the things we want to do this year as a service is sign MOU with all government institutions on the sharing of microdata. So once we get that through, and we're taking this at a very high level, because it requires some interministerial guidance on this, then institutions will be obliged. Indeed, that is what the law says, that GSS can approach any institution, and that institution is obliged to give the service what data. But we don't want to always go and say that that is what the law is, so give us the data. But it's a matter of what is the relationship that we have, and that is exactly what we are building.
Mr. Kabono, let's talk about the impact of the jaw-dropping number. So if the guy is taking, at that senior level, he's taking 3,000, which means that a lot of people are taking even far less, in the thousands. Yeah. What is the real impact on productivity?
It has negative impact. It means that gentleman is having a divided attention, and that gentleman is doing, or lady is doing something untoward. Even
ladies worse. Or I come to the gender disparity, because that's an even worse scenario. Yeah, please.
That gentleman or lady is doing something worse. So if that person is found in your catering department, then that person will have to survive by hook or crook in that catering department. So if you read news items of some ladies in the various school kitchen being found to have been carrying some food from the school home and so on and so forth, so in as much as I disagree with you,
but they have to survive.
That is a question of survival, you understand. And again, there could also be a chain that does these things. If you have a secretary in an office who is not being paid well, and your A4 sheets get diminished faster than they should, then sometimes it's a question of the person not being. So it will have a general negative impact. But then, when the sense of, when despondency sets in at a workplace, you don't expect to get anything meaningful. We need to re-look at our general salary regime. Sometimes when you listen to labor agitating for certain allowances, it's just an attempt to match up with what? Shortfalls in the statutory income. So they will ask for allowances here, ask for allowances there. I recall that a gentleman from the US paid a visit to the University of Ghana some few years ago and was surprised that they were paying sitting allowance to council members. In his country, salaries are stated as A, and it is more or less like a consolidated salary. Therefore, when you are put on a council, you are put on a council based on the fact that you've reached this rank or you are this personality. So he found it very difficult that in the University of Ghana, they were paying people sitting allowances because something that he didn't. Then the University of Ghana stopped for a while and had to reintroduce it because we need to relook at what incomes are and how we can pay people the right incomes so that we take out some of these issues of allowances, fridge allowance, entertainment allowance that gives a managing director some bottles of beer and things in his fridge and so on and so forth. We attempted this in this country some time ago where we attempted to consolidate all salaries. But we went back again because the consolidated salary was inadequate and started asking for allowances and so on and so on. Now I don't know the percentage of total allowances as against the stated and statutory salaries that we take, because the allowances are not universal. It's based on rank, it's based on position, it's based on where you find yourself working. We need to relook at the income policy, salary policy of our country and come up with something that is workable and something that is sustainable.
Let's go there because, Prof, on the back of this, you have recommended that we need to take a second look at the single spine salary structure. What did you mean?
I would say that it's not really a recommendation from me. I know it's a conversation that is currently happening at the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission. So you recall last year we had a conversation on productivity.
True.
And then this whole issue.
Based on another...
Correct. And this whole issue of how we can introduce performance into what we are doing. From where I sit, the storyline is always the same. If you don't measure something, there's no point talking about it. We've started measuring inequality, and in the release I did say that if at the time of the single spine we had done this exercise, we would have had statistical targets that would have used as baseline. So today's conversation would have made reference to what was the state of earnings inequalities in terms of numbers. And then we'll say that we've reduced it by this percentage or otherwise. But I'm yet to see any document that had statistical targets for the single spine. So going forward, if we have this study and the review is going to take place, it becomes our baseline. Then, as I said, if we are doing this twice a year, every year we can measure our progress towards a reduction in earnings inequality or otherwise.
Let me ask a question. So you've raised a point about measuring productivity. Is it fair, learning that 80% and that much, to even start talking about measuring it? But I mean, what are you going to measure? Of course, if the guy is earning 3,000 less, you don't really expect anything from him. I mean, isn't that a fair point to make at this point?
I appreciate the fact that it is low, but you better measure it to have a conversation around it. All this we are talking about is equity, fairness. So if you are earning 3,000, are you doing what is expected of you from the 3,000? Or you are doing more than what is expected from you on the 3,000 or less? I always say that we are not pushing for an equal state. We know it's not attainable. But if you want to talk about fairness, the starting point is what is the state of inequality? So we need to establish that state of inequality like we are doing and now ask ourselves, why are they unequal? Are they doing things differently or they are doing things the same and it's just that some people are paid more and others less? So the measurement is so fundamental. Indeed, it should precede any conversation. But that is what we are not doing in this country, and we are hoping that this is the start of measuring earnings inequality and productivity.
Thankfully, the Deputy Secretary General of the TUC is joining us, Joshua Ansah. Hello, Ms. Ansah. Hello, Ms. Ansah, please unmute for me. Can you hear me, sir? Hello, Ms. Ansah. Okay. I can hear you now. Can you hear me? Oh, unfortunately, I see you are talking, but I can't hear you. But let's hope that we can, because the connection is pretty clear.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
I can, yes. Thank you very much. Let me ask you about where we just reached with the prof on fixing this problem. The single spine salary structure was introduced to deal with this question of equity, wasn't it? So now that we learn in this is a 2022 report, that gap has, if not for anything, has widened so much. Isn't it a verdict on the single spine that it has really failed to achieve what it was intended to?
Thank you, Evans, and my regard to Angel and the Prof and the challenge listeners. Evans, I would say it has totally failed to achieve its objective that was set for the single spine salary structure. A lot of things are wrong, and we think that we need to relook at the single spine pay structure, which I think a committee has been put in place to look at. But there are so many things and so many factors that has actually resulted in the low income for workers in this very country. And I think that it is time for us to actually relook and check what went wrong, what has gone wrong, why is it that we are unable to achieve the objective for which the single spine pay salary, which was said to be the panacea for pay disparities in this country, is not achieving. So I think that it has not achieved this purpose, and we think that we need to relook at it holistically. Otherwise, this problem is going to persist every day, now and then. Yes.
You said there's a committee that was set up. Can you update us on the work of the committee?
Well, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Yeah, the committee is still working, and they have not submitted their report. They were expected to submit their report to the main tripartite committee, but it has not yet been submitted. So I think it's a work in progress. But I think that it's time for us to actually fast track whatever they are doing to ensure that we position our salary structure in this country very well. Otherwise, we are going to continue to experience these disparities, and workers will not give out their best. Workers are already demoralized, and they don't expect that a demoralized worker can put up his best. So Evans, it is time for us to behind the committee to ensure that it takes the committee's work very serious and come up with some kind of proposals for consideration. I think that this time around it's not going to be after the committee has submitted a report, then it's a finished job. It has to pass through so many structures to ensure that we are doing the right thing so that we don't revisit.
Oh, we lost him there. Angel is with me. I'm sure you know a bit more about that committee's report. I was going to ask him, so, I mean, beyond, we are waiting for the committee to come out.
Yeah.
What specifically about the single spine policy is Labour unhappy about that you want?
Oh, the disparities in the policy, the fact that the policy really negatively affects some other people and favors some people, and then every year there is salary increase, then the gap begins to widen between the higher levels and the lower levels, and so on and so forth. Now, the measurement of jobs to see whether this man or that woman deserves the amount of money that he or she is requesting for or is taking home, all these things. But let me also say something quickly about the committee. The formation of the committee was done in such a manner that it disadvantages workers. And some unions have really raised the red flag that the composition of the committee itself creates a problem.
What's the composition?
You know, you have government representative of committee, we have employers association. You have people we believe even who do not belong to the single spine on the committee. And we are having difficulties as to whether people who are not on single spine could take decision on behalf of people who are on single spine. But that is our issue. We will have to sort the issue. But the principle is that the single spine pay policy will have to be reviewed. Will have to be reviewed in such a manner that at the end of the day, every public sector worker gets satisfied as to his or her placement on the single spine pay policy.
When you say review, that's what I was trying to drill down to it. I mean, in 2010, when it was introduced, the disparities was very important in trying to deal with it. It obviously hasn't done that over the years. So I wonder why. I mean, why has it, for something that was brought in to do particularly with the problem, but then has exacerbated the problem. It's quite amazing in terms of.
Yes.
It's just been 2010 to now is what, 12 years?
Yes. Well, when I talk about review, I'm not using the review definition of the NDC MPP when it comes to free senior.
I know what you mean.
I'm talking about review that will enhance the quality of the salaries, the structure itself first, and then the salary that people take. I'm talking about review that will iron out the disparities and the differences that exist on the current single span. Call it whatever we wish to call it. At the end of the day, what is most significant to the worker is the amount of money he takes home, whether that money relates to the items he or she will buy or the services that he or she requires. That is what we are looking at. We are also looking at a situation where in this country, Ghana, everybody who works for the public will have to fall onto a single salary structure.
When you say everybody, includes the Article 71?
From the president, you see, when you have different pay structures, it sows the seed for agitation. Because people compare. One of the reasons for worker agitation is the disparities. I see my colleague in this sector. I'm in this sector. I see how much he earns. I feel I even work harder than he or she does. Okay? So then let me also go and negotiate something better. When it comes to pensions, we also have these disparities in pensions. There are people who are still being paid on Cap 30. And there are people who are paid. If the pension is good for everybody, why don't we all get hooked on the same pension, working for the same government? So we have so much disparity in incomes and earnings in this country to the extent that one begins to get suspicious that certain people are isolated to be treated in one manner and others are also segregated somewhere to be treated. These are the sources of agitation within the workers.
But then the constitutional issue will come in, right? Because for a particular class of workers, they are defined in the Constitution.
The Constitution is just a document put together by human beings. And when we think that that aspect of that document is inimical to our survival, we all have to sit at the table, change that aspect of that document, and get a documentation that works for everybody.
Sorry, clarify, you're suggesting that when you're reviewing a single spine, put everybody else on that spine once you reviewed it?
We are talking about salary fairness in salary payment, ironing out disparity. Don't isolate people as special people who Constitution sanctifies to take better salaries. Let us create a country. I'm not saying I should take the same salary as a judge. I'm saying that there should be what? Fairness. So that if the judge is on the government salary structure and is on level 92, where I also belong at level 61, I should belong to that level 61. But again, we don't want to isolate people and give them some special treatment and then bring some other people here and give them some haphazard treatment. That is what we are talking about. We are in no way saying that I should be paid the same salary as the Chief Justice of Ghana. I should be paid the same salary as the President of Ghana. I mean, does it not look absurd that the CEO of the Cocoa Board takes home around 700,000 Ghana cedis? What is that?
Does he?
Yeah, but that is what we. What is, he takes more than he takes home more than the president.
Yes, yes.
Does it not sound absurd to you?
Let me ask Prof, what have you learned from this work that may help in the process of reviewing the single spine, if any?
Just one thing. You see, if you are deploying a universal salary structure, it means ahead of the deployment, you know the pegs that you are putting at the different grades. So once you do that, you should be able to estimate the inequality that would exist before you start deploying it. So all that you do is as you go forward, you measure that inequality to see whether it's in line with what you set.
Okay.
So that's the simple thing that we need to do. If it's done, let all of us estimate the inequality that that structure will bring about.
I'm curious. I mean, when the single spine was being introduced, I mean, statistical survey has existed for so long. Was there a similar survey to inform the process? Do you know if there's been?
No, I'm not aware.
So this is the
first.
So far as you can, this is the first time. But how is that? I mean, wasn't it informed by data? I mean, everybody knew the problem existed, and so I'm just curious what the statistical basis was for the change. I mean, you're hoping that this will inform the review of the.
So this is telling us what is happening now, and what I'm saying is, if we get through with the review and they do the pegs, as he said, this grade ends that, that grade ends that, that grade ends that. Based on that, we should be able to estimate what inequality, the level of inequality that that salary structure, reviewed salary structure, will bring about. It might tell us that it's going to be a 10% inequality. Okay. And then as a country with time, we see whether we are sticking to, because the structure itself would have an inherent inequality, because people are paid based on different grades. Yeah. So all that I'm proposing is that if we get through to it, let's come out, let's say that this is the inherent inequality, and then on a yearly basis, we monitor that we stay within that band.
I mean, Joshua is back with me. Joshua, so we lost you briefly. You were giving us details of as to as far as the TUC is concerned with the review of the single spine pay policy. What specifically do you want to see in that review?
For us, I think Angel has said it all. Until all Ghanaians, public sector, public servants, every worker in this country are put on one single structure, one pay structure, there's no way that we can resolve this problem that is happening on a single spine pay salary. Until something is done to change the salary system in this very country, where all Ghanaians, every worker, be it whatever, are put on one structure. And I think that is what we have to call for. That whether it's Article 71, whatever, we must all be put on a one single salary structure. And that is where the fairness could be achieved. Anything short of that is going to be very difficult for us to achieve the fairness that we are talking about. So it is time, as the single spine pay structure goes on the review, I think that it is expected that the committee bring proposals that can contain what I am proposing now. Until that is done, Evans, I mean, whatever we are doing will not achieve the expected results.
But I asked that question of Major Kabono. Let me ask of you too. There are real constitutional legal issues at play here. I mean, because obviously we crafted this constitution for ourselves, and we created a class of people called Article 71 office holders, whose emoluments and entitlements and salaries are already been defined. In fact, there's a whole committee that does the work, and it's all constitutional. That will be challenging unless you amend the constitution. I don't see how it's possible to have a structure that puts them on that.
Yes, but Evans, what stops us from amending the constitution?
Okay.
If we have seen a problem that is bringing our productivity down because of salary disparities and unfairness in the pay system in this very country, I think as a country, we must all come together to change the system, to include everybody. You see, when everybody is included on that structure, that is where, like Angel said, if somebody is on the level 200 and I am on level 100, I know that I deserve the level 100 that I'm being placed. But where it is not seen that people take as low as 5,000, like 500, 1,800 and the rest, and others are also taking, like Angel mentioned. I see there's no way that we can solve this very problem. So I think that if the constitution needs to be amended to include everybody on one single pay salary, despite whatever that will be done to get the people on their rightful structures. Once we are all on the structure, like you mentioned about pensions, if some of us are taking pensions, others are on cap 30, others are exempted, and so on and so forth, there's no way that you can achieve our set objectives in fairness in this very country. So Evans, I think that it is time for us to, if it is necessary to review the constitution, why not? We have to do it to ensure that we stabilize the unfairness in salary structure in this very country. I will call for that one. And I think that we must all rally behind it so that that constitution is amended to reflect what we all think is be fair to everybody in this very country.
Prof, I mean, both Andrew Kabono and Ms. Mensah had made the point about bringing Article 71 office holders into one. But if you look at your data, the disparity exists within those in the public sector other than the Article 71 office holders, because the data that you look at, the 680, the disparity of the 80%, the 15%, the 2%, the 0%, it's all within public sector.
Yes.
Excluding Article 71 office holders.
No. As I indicated, the data on the payroll, we have a group called Article 71.
But they were not part of those that you...
No, they
you
were
saw.
part of the 688,000.
Oh, they were part. So the Article 71 were part of the 688,000?
Yes, but I raised a question on, definitely they are not exhaustive, because it's not all those who are there that get their salaries via the controller and accountant general
So
department.
some of them were captured in
Some
your
of them
work?
were captured.
Okay.
Some political appointees were also captured. In the data, you see clearly these categories.
Is it because I was going to raise the point that if I thought they were excluded, then you have to look at then dealing with the disparity within the public sector. But then they have a point. Do you think they have a point then in saying that let's get Article 71, everybody else to be on one structure?
No, I fully agree.
To deal with the disparity.
I mean, that is what the universal salary structure is. It is universal salary structure.
Absolutely. I mean, so what has been a challenge in the past? I mean, because I mean, it's as simple as that.
You see,
What has been a challenge?
actually, that constitutional issue did not hit us until single spine began.
Okay.
Then people started raising issues about the quantum, and then we realized that whilst public sector workers of one category were raising issues of salary quantum, others had another way of negotiating their salaries, where the president can constitute a committee and so on and so. That is when we started making... Time was when nobody knew how much some other people were earning in this country. You never saw their pay slips. They never mentioned, and of course, they also don't go on strike. They never agitated. They just survived. Yeah. But now things are more transparent, and people know. If I want to know how much everybody earns, I'm capable of getting how much everybody earns, right? So at the end of the day, people started asking themselves the question: why do we have a situation like this? Why do some people retire on their salaries and others don't? And so on and so forth. What necessitates that to happen? Why have you isolated that person to get that condition? If it is good for the goose, it ought to be good for the gander. So these are some of the issues that bring us some of the...
It's interesting. It just struck me. So this 80% who earn less than 3,000 will include police officers, etc., etc. Or they're not part.
We'll include police officers of some category.
Of some category.
Yes.
I mean, but that's very worrying, right? So now you begin to appreciate. If the police officer is earning that low, no wonder. They harass me on the road. I mean...
Yeah, they have to harass you because they'll have to extend that frustration on you.
But it just lets you appreciate the problem, right? I mean, I honestly thought the police officers were a different scale because of the kind of work they do.
Yes.
And they can go on a strike like you.
Yes.
They can complain,
But they feel the heat.
Yes. I mean, but confirm, they're part of the 688,000.
Some of them.
Yes.
Some of them. Wow.
Only of some category, yes.
Okay. I mean, but that lets you appreciate the problem that we are dealing with as a country, right? I mean, so this is urgent. I mean, dealing with this problem, it's such an urgent matter.
It's an urgent matter when we want to raise the...
But we can't afford, right?
No, do we want to exact out of the worker high level of productivity to be able to transform this country?
But that's based on assumption that because you pay them more, automatically leads.
No, but then you have the moral right to demand of them certain performance indicators. So when you when you have performance indicators, they will also have to satisfy that performance indicator. Okay. Yes.
Prof, thank you very much. We're looking forward to the full, you should go to there's a partnership coming up that will give us a bit more detail. I'm grateful. Angel, thank you very much. I'm sure you are there. There's a group that entered the 3,000.
Maybe you have to work at multimedia to be in that category.
No. As a journalist, next time Prof needs to do a sample of journalists, you'll probably be very surprised. We are possibly in the range of 3,000.
You never know. When the disaggregation is done, you know that you, the journalists, are also in categories.
Enjoy the rest of your evening.